is on my iPad. It's kind of close. But just relax, and let me put you to sleep with some scary stories. Scary stories. Thank you all for joining me tonight. That was my big phone because I'm recording on my iPad. I don't know if you can see me. That was me when I was a baby. Well, my mom, mostly. Alright. Late night. So I have been digging for terrifying, not safe for work, true scary stories. I mean, from 12 days ago to 12 years ago. So, and then of course in the comments there's tons of stories. So we are just going to pass all the hellos. I hope you all are doing well, but let's just get into it. I mean, we might as well just get creeped out as quickly as possible. And if you ever hear anybody snoring, that is my dog, River. So without further ado. Late Night by you, Shorty 420. This story is true. It takes place just over the last weekend, and I need to get it off my chest, to be quite honest. Many women go through their entire life on the side of caution, if not borderline fear, and more often than not have a story about SA. This is not about me, but what I had witnessed. My visceral instincts. And to bring awareness. My friend and I, both women, in our mid-20s. It's hard to be in your mid-20s this time and age, I swear. Went out for a few drinks at the club to dance and get it on. Usually at bars, women are super friendly towards each other. Well, I have not found that to always be the case, but so we're dancing on the dance floor, having a blast. We meet these girls, presumably around the same age as we are. One of the girls is wearing a red dress, and the other is wearing a floral dress. I never got their names, but it seemed that they had been at this club for a while because they were pretty tipsy, maybe even drunk. Red was still coherent, but flower was definitely borderline wasted, blackout drunk. She could barely talk. My friend and I are facing the DJ booth because there is a light show. There is a ton of people dancing, grinding up on each other, which is a very common dance at a nightclub, of course. I mean, it has been, trust me, forever. A guy approaches Flower and they start dancing, her backside pressed into him. At first, just two people dancing. My friend is talking to Red, facing away, watching the laser light show. As well as I am, you can barely hear anything in this place. The music, of course, is extremely loud, and the acoustics are never excellent at clubs. Let's face it, most of them are in old warehouses. But I heard the guy dancing with Flower ask, "What's your name?" And she doesn't answer. She isn't talking. In this moment, I knew maybe she was too drunk, and I took a note of that. But they continued dancing, and so did the rest of us. This is why I never drank when I went out dancing. Never. A few minutes later, I took over, and Flower looks visibly. I look over, and Flower looks visibly uncomfortable. Her eyes are glazed over, and she's sweating, like dripping. Red is nowhere in sight. I look at them, and my eyes move downward, and the guy's hand is, well, in her underwear, touching her in inappropriate places. I know she didn't consent to that because she didn't even speak to him, and we were a public place on the dance floor. Immediately, I ask her if she's okay, and the girl who didn't speak all night says, "No." Something came over me in that moment. I look over at the guy and I scream at him, "Get the F off her right now." He says something back to me in my face, to his defense, but I didn't even listen. I didn't even care about what the hell he had to say. In one millisecond, I realize I cannot deal with this man, and it is packed in this place. I could not find security. I grabbed him by the shoulder, looked him in the eye with the most crazy look I had, but as calm as I could be, and I say, "Get the F out of here and leave right now. Right now." He puts his hands up and says, "Okay," and leaves. I turn to Red, who has suddenly made herself present. I grab her on the shoulder and I say to her, "Your homegirl is not okay." She says, "Okay." A surprisingly tame reaction, and they leave. Immediately after this, I pull my friend aside and tell her what happened. She is in utter disbelief because she had no idea that was happening in the slightest. We talk to security, give him a description, grab another drink, and make sure he is forced to leave. But after a little while, we are dancing again. I make eye contact with that same pervert on the dance floor. He never left. I really believed I saved that girl from something incomprehensibly horrible happening to her. I will never forget the smirk on the guy's face. Please be safe out there. Well, good for you, because it takes a lot of balls to protect somebody you don't even know. Honest to God, that is like hero. Dear puzzle-headed 5254, our true scary stories. I grew up in a cult. Now I have some form of attachment. At the age of 4, I was placed into a system. I spent 10 years being placed back and forth between there and my biological mother, ultimately being adopted by the original family I was placed in, which happened to be a cult. People often laugh out of nervousness when I mention being brought up in a cult, trying to change the subject. Or even just assume I'm messing around with them, but I'm not. That's unfortunately not the case, so let me explain some of how they work for further knowledge. Here are the rules. No outside communication. No association with anyone outside the organization. 70+ hour minimum servitude time a month. No sports or school activities. No smoking or drinking of any kind. No unarranged relationships. And their beliefs on punishment are Old Testament, to say the least. There were also strict gender rules. Women were not to speak, meaning unless spoken to or called upon, women were not to work unless it's absolutely necessary and approved by the elders. Alright, I'm just gonna tell you right now, I would not lasted 5 seconds in this cult, even as a child. Yeah. You also are required to turn in a medical paperwork, not report crimes, even extreme cases. Now the bulk of that is out of the way. Let me begin. I'm 24 now and I have some form of attachment. Whole days go missing sometimes. Oh yeah, I wake up in random places and something is following me, absolutely. I ran away as soon as I could. Well, as soon as I was legally able. That's not to say the trauma didn't follow, or at least what I thought. It wasn't even a night before I started having horrible graphic dreams. Things like violent rituals, sacrifices, and running, not really from anything I can see. A couple weeks later, I started being followed directly. I had people following me home from college in all black with dark faces. Oh my god, this is terrifying. Can you imagine? Sometimes it would feel as if there were too many to choose a route home. Oh my god. I mean, this can happen. This sounds very much like an attachment. I bought a taser shortly after that. My life was it was terrifying. I was going weeks without any real sleep. I've had multiple mental evaluations done and nothing comes of them. So I am mentally sound. A few months after the start of everything, I began to sleep more than I'd ever had. Oh my gosh. I mean days. I slept for days. I went to sleep November 6, 2019, and coherently woke up on the 9th. No dreams, but get this. I had bruises everywhere and scratches down my chest. I've now surrounded myself with spiritual healing supplies, crystals, protection spells, the lot. But I continue to wake up to a black cloud, what looks like a burning say this was all make-believe and just a scary joke, but it's gone on for 5 years. Anyone have a similar situation or know how to make it better? Well, there are a couple ways of looking at this. You can either see a trauma therapist which is going the traditional route, like a medical route. I'm thinking that something has been allowed to enter, like figment or something dark. I mean, if she's going days without even knowing where she is, this is not good in the dark cloud. She's gonna have to really get some spiritual guidance. Now, she could be, this is another thing, she could be disassociating from all of the trauma or abuse that she is trying. Do not think about that could be happening, but it sounds like if this was actually a true case of disassociation, she would have done it prior to leaving the cult. Maybe not, but usually disassociation, in my experience, has been when the horrific events start occurring. That's how their body deals with it. It doesn't usually come after, but it could be, completely wrong. Everybody is different. I just can't even imagine going through this. She has had mental evaluations done, and everything is fine. So, okay, here's some information. My bio family played with witchcraft, and not the light kind. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. She's got a spiritual attachment, and everybody keeps saying, oh, you just have to deal with the trauma from the abuse. But here's the thing, it didn't start until all those years after, when she left. So I just don't see somebody disassociating after they leave. It's usually while the abuse is happening. Shadow work is a good idea. I mean, you could smudge your home with Palo Santo. Don't use just a plain sage, because unfortunately, if you do that, it's like taking chemo. It kills everything, which allows everything the opportunity to enter your life. So even though sage can be good to cleanse, it can cleanse too much, get my drift, and entities can actually enter if you are not strong enough to keep them out. So lavender, lilac, Palo Alto, or Palo Santo. What is the other one? Like, oh, I know it. I had to think about it. But yeah, try, if you're going to cleanse an area, try not to use I'm a girl and I was looking for no strings attached date of sorts with another girl. I just wanted the comfort. Who knows? I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're all entitled to need affection, so don't be hard on yourself. There's nothing wrong with casually dating. Just be safe. I went on Plenty of Fish and let everyone know I was on the market. I only matched with 3 people. One was a bit nuts right away. I said no. The other didn't respond to my message. The third one, however, was a little loopy and over-enthusiastic, but we somehow had a lot in common. Be careful of having a lot in common too with people on dating sites, because a predator will all of a sudden have everything in common with you and everybody else they date. That's how they get you. It's like, oh my god, I do that too. Oh, I can't believe. Oh my gosh, you have that same kind of dog. Oh my gosh, me too. Oh, you rescue dogs, me too. Oh, you love the ocean. Be careful of that. It's a good sign when people actually have their own hobbies that are different from yours. So I am an American exchange student living in the UK. Genuinely, I think the British are a little crazy anyway. Yeah, well, they are. We love them. After exchanging half a dozen texts per night for the whole week, she insisted on meeting up. Why not? We met at a local bar near where I stay. She was a bit on the heavier side, but that's fine. She had long, dark hair to her hips. I'd have killed for hair as long as this. That is so true. Oh, pardon the pun. She was very gothic in appearance. Dark clothes, black and purple nails. We got talking, and straight away we start sharing our kinks. She was very straight to the point, very forward with me. Let me just say she was in no hurry to get to know me. She even insisted I go to her place. Wow, okay, so she was in a hurry. I think that's a little typo. It's okay. I told her to calm her jets, allow me to get to know her first. As much as I wanted comfort and somebody to keep me company, my god, this was going way too fast. It was then she made a confession to me. This girl tells me about her bondage adventures. Now, mind you, I have already read this, so I know it's coming. And it's crazy, I promise you. She said she likes to punish men. She said that she enjoys torturing them for fun, which is horrific. But me being naive, I laugh it off, because why would anybody actually tell somebody they don't know this, right? But there was a wicked, sinister energy in her eyes and her demeanor that made me think maybe, just maybe, she was telling me the truth. She saw that I didn't really believe her nor take her seriously. I mean, because let's just say, if somebody came up to me and told me they were torturing people for fun, I wouldn't want to know anymore. My good lord, oh my gosh. She had several photos of men wrapped up in cellophane. I still have my doubts that this was real until she showed me an actual video of a guy, oh my god, fully mummified in cellophane, rolling around on a bed, trying to escape. His muffled screams haunt me to this day. I asked her why she would do such a thing. Her answer, because it's fun, letting out a high-pitched squeal like a little girl and laughing under her breath. I asked what happens to the guys next. She literally says, I don't know, I just leave them there like that, so who really knows? You'd have needed a forklift to lift my jaw off the floor at this moment. She said that she'd done this to plenty of men, and there's a high chance most of them didn't survive. Well, if you are in cellophane, okay, wrapped up from head to toe, yeah, there's probably zero chance that you're gonna make it. One day you'll be watching the news about the Kling film killer, she says. So she even has a name for herself. This is really sick. After all this, she then insisted that we head to her place. Hell no. I'd waited till she went to the restroom, and I made a beeline for the door. I never felt so scared in my entire life. I had a few missed calls from her. It sent chills down my spine. I was too scared to answer this lunatic. I would have reported her to the police, but was told I didn't have enough evidence. Oh, I did report her to the police, but they told me I didn't have enough evidence of this. Also, her cell phone number had been cut off, and plenty of fish profile had been deleted. It still sends chills up and down my spine that such a crazy girl would casually confess to such a thing. I'm hoping that it's some sort of sick prank, but I can't unsee what I saw. Okay, you saw the proof. She's not messing around. I don't think she did this for fun, especially if she's not into guys. Like, I can feel my heart racing. Like, that is so scary. Oh my gosh. Somebody responds, I literally just read a story like that on Creepy Encounters. A guy who met a girl. They went to the bar. It seemed like he drugged her. Woke up to the cops surrounding him, completely wrapped up in cellophane. So here's the Creepy Encounter story. Tinder date tried to kill me. Not safe for work is the story. Wow, holy crap. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. I just got chills. Oh my god. So somebody responded that she drugged him, but fiance get into bed next to me. I roll over to face him and open my eyes. It wasn't my fiance, it was a man with a swollen jaw and a bent face. He did not have any facial features other than a shadowy smear where eyes might have been. He was staring down at me. I mean, staring as if he was studying me. He was curious about me, analyzing me. It was so intense and disturbing, and to be quite honest, very intrusive. I tried to get up, but my body was frozen. I didn't try to scream because I couldn't work my vocal cords. Then he was gone, just as fast as he came. Up until tonight, I thought it was sleep paralysis. But it just hit me. I rolled over. I physically rolled over and looked up at him. It wasn't until I tried to leave that I wasn't capable of moving. That definitely wasn't sleep paralysis. Wow. So everybody wants to know what she means by a bent face. She says, OP says it's kind of difficult to describe. His face had sharp edges, was warped as though a big hand had tried to wipe it away. The shape and outline of his face looked like the jaw had been knocked to one side or dislocated. Again, my heart is racing. focus up. Unfortunately, I'm not sure how many acres it was that she owned. Well, let's just say it was fairly big, and it stretched into the main forest and even to a railroad track, which of course my father made trails in. Anyway, I had always made my way through these trails every time I came for the weekend, sometimes even bringing my dog, Buddy, with me. I would spend a large amount of time out there, usually on foot, since my father didn't trust me alone on the 4x4 we had. Just any other day, I decided to take a walk down the trail, but this time alone. Buddy had to be groomed and washed at the time. The time was around 3 in the afternoon, if I remember correctly. It also just rained recently, so of course the walk was a little muddy. Concerning that there was a recent lodging in the main entrance to the trails, I had spent a couple hours out there, even sitting down on a tree or the ground itself sometimes during the walk. I was just having a great time, enjoying every bit of being outside. Before I knew it, I found myself on the main trail. It was a dirt road, going down a narrow way, with the forest on both sides. In the middle were rows of power lines. The dirt road was fairly uneven, filled with holes, trenches, etc. I believe it was somewhere around 6 p.m. now. And the sun started to set, giving off that yellow glow. And that orange, beautiful look to the trail. The first thing came to be suddenly as I took a moment to stop. lost sound, but my guess is as good as yours. After the scream, there's a series of weird snort-like sounds, maybe 3 or 4. I'm dumbfounded. I have heard strange things in the forest before. Like I said previously, foxes, horses, cows, coyotes, none of it made sense. It wasn't a call of any animal or even a cry of any animal I had ever known of. Obviously different. It didn't even sound like an animal to me, to be honest. But of course, I wasn't really thinking about this at the time. As many times we don't, because we are struck with such bizarre fear and confusion. I don't think most of us will just sit there and ponder, oh, this is probably a demon or a spirit. I mean, my daughter and I do, but that's because we deal with these things. But most people, I think, from a very simple, like, I'm walking through the woods today perspective, you're not gonna say, there's a demon or something evil following us. But just my opinion, maybe I'm wrong. But I just stood there, frozen, listening for a moment. I just turned around and ran after I could find my footing again. Pure adrenaline turned my body into a well-trained track athlete as I ran non-stop for probably a few minutes before I slipped somewhere near the lodging. I want to say he's talking about logging area, but I'm not familiar with other than buildings, but I don't think that's what he means by lodging. So if anybody, I've just never heard this spoken in this manner. I don't know. I fell and got cramped up, covered in mud. The adrenaline had finally worn off. I limped the rest of the way back, and I never told anyone, not even my own father. Until now, a bunch of strangers know on Reddit. But from time to time, I still think about it. Randomly, thoughts in my head pop up. Let's say I'm on the bus or something like that, I will think about this. But to this day, I still haven't decided what it could have possibly been. My logical mind tells me that was just some random hurt animal, probably caught in a trap. But then again, who knows? I don't know. I didn't even think about cougars. Yeah, it depends where in North Carolina. I'd have to look up to see if North Carolina has cougars. They absolutely might. They absolutely might. On to the next terrifying or true scary stories. U/positive _SH or sage _7710. Scary childhood story between me and my sister. I was 11 at the time, and it was only my sister and I still living at home. My dad worked overnight a lot, and that night it was just us in the house. I can remember it being very dark, so maybe we had gone to bed less than an hour before this happened. All of a sudden I heard something ruffling, what sounded like Christmas wrapping paper or loud plastic, maybe even tinfoil. You could hear the way She was reading a book in the living room while I was outside playing, and she would hear someone tapping. Tapping on the wall. And every time she looked up to see what it was, the tapping would stop. I really don't remember us even talking about that night again. But for a period of time after that, I requested to sleep in her bed because I was too terrified to sleep in mine. Somebody said chipmunk, but as a kid we had lots of chipmunks that would get stuck in our one part of the house, and I never heard anything a chipmunk do sound like crunching wrapping paper. I mean, they're little, and why wouldn't it make that sound again? Chipmunks aren't thinking, well, I'm not gonna do this, I'm gonna be quieter, because they don't think like that. Somebody says capybara. It's chupacabra. Maybe. Depends what they are. Whenever you write these stories into Reddit, make sure you give us a destination somewhere you are. That way we know that, or we can help you figure out what it is. Just like if you are in Canada, I'm not going to be thinking that you have, a monkey that might be in Miami out your window. When I went to the University of Miami for college, we had these monkeys, these little monkeys. I don't know if they were thumb monkeys or swinging monkeys in the trees. I can't remember the species of monkey, but they would make the strangest clicking noise at night right outside my dorm room window. And at first I'm thinking, what in the hell? I'm on the 4th floor, and the clicking would freak me out. But somebody then told me that it was just the monkeys that live in the trees. So they're banyan trees. So that's why it's important to know exactly where you are located. I mean, we don't have to know the exact town, but, and your address, of course, don't write that, but like about where you are in the world, so we can kind of figure out or help you figure out what it might be. And I only say that because chupacabra is more specifically aligned with the South American culture or Southwest. I have not, now don't quote me on this, but because I'm not really familiar with the chupacabra other than from South America, and that's just from different conversations I've had with my South American friends, but I could be wrong. It's just my opinion, so just my opinion, and I'm always curious to know what you think. So now we're moving on. Viewability at the dentist. When I was little, about 8, I absolutely hated going to my dentist. He always made me feel uncomfortable. That weird internal assistants had to literally drag me back, screaming and kicking. Now, this should tell, if I'm a parent, my child is doing this, I'm pulling him out of that dentist office. I'm sorry, something is not appropriate going on back there. They drug me to the back, put me in a room, and you could hear me screaming and crying down the hall, refusing to sit in the chair. Finally, my dad came back to get me, irritated. I'd made a scene. He rescheduled my appointment to when my mom would have me. We left. He made a big deal about how bad I was acting. Told my mom she was spoiling me and all sorts of really mean stuff. But listen to this. 2 weeks later, on the news, that my dentist was charged with child P after essaying children under anesthesia and photographing it. Oh my god. That's crazy. See, that's what I mean when your kid is acting like that. For a dentist he goes to all the time, there's something wrong. There is definitely something wrong. I lived, Tommy, not Tommy. I need to get glasses. Tommy Sticks, SSS. So I lived in a small college town. My apartment complex was walking distance from the bar downtown area. It was pretty cool being in college and being able to walk to the bars. One weekday night I stepped out on our front porch to smoke a cigarette. I was up late studying. I brought my textbook with me and sat down on the stairs while I smoked. A girl who I'd never met, but I knew lived one apartment over. However, down on the ground floor, came home from downtown. She was by herself, and you could tell from her walk she was pretty drunk. She made it into her apartment and barely got the door closed before some guy came out of nowhere, knocked her on the floor. She had opened the door, and so they were in the doorway. I peered over. I noticed he introduced himself, which was weird after he just shoved her over at 2:30 in the morning. I didn't see the look in her face, but I know the look on mine was that of terror. Who comes to a strange girl's apartment at 2:30 in the morning, shoves her down, and then tries to introduce themselves? this is in London because there's another story that has even a Wikipedia link to the R order. No, it was in the States. I have no link to mine. Happened several moons ago. So this happened in Georgia. But apparently, this whole gap thing has been a problem. I don't know if you've been watching on YouTube or Facebook or TikTok, but there's a lot of ads saying if you've been essayed by a Uber driver, a cab driver, or a Lyft driver, there is a lawsuit that some group is going after these guys because apparently it happens more than we realize. You know, it's just like women reporting when they are R-worded. Many of them go unreported because of the shame and fear of not being believed. I'm sure it's the same way with Uber drivers or Lyft drivers. People probably just think, well, nothing happened, or he was just trying to hit on me, but I don't want to say anything because nobody will believe me. Please don't feel that way. Speak out, and I think you'll realize it happens more than you think. I know the more I read lately on here, the more I find out that this is happening more and more. And if you think about it, I was actually telling this to my daughter, if you think about it, they can easily just end your ride because they have that power to. They can tell Lyft or Uber that you're being rude and disrespectful, so they ended the ride and let you off. But in reality, they can use it as a way to tell Uber that you are out of their cab, and they can really do whatever they want with you. That is terrifying to me. When Uber started, I never thought that this would happen, but why not? I guess I should have. People will always find a way to make anything positive bad. I don't know why. Somebody says that this happens in Canada too. I'm sure. I mean, when moving on, forget as it typed. When I was little, my mom would take me to Kmart, let me wander around the toy sections while she shopped. Now this happened back in the 70s. One day I was playing Simon Says, and an old man walked up to me, making small talk while I played. He eventually told me that he wanted me to come with him and took me by the hand. We walked right down the main center aisle of the store, right towards the exit sign in the back. As we crossed the last row, I looked to the right, saw my mom at the end of the row. I told him I had to go because there was my mom. I pulled away my hand and I ran down to her. She never asked why I was so frantic, and I never told her. I didn't want to get in trouble for going with a stranger. Several years later that I realized that I probably just avoided being kidnapped or worse. That's true. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. I was little. section so she could shop. Very scary. So 1B62 has a very similar story. When I was a kid, I was always the last kid picked up by the bus driver to go to school. One day I was waiting for the bus by myself, and a bus with no kids pulled up. Oh my god, I think I've read this one before. This is terrifying. The bus driver smiled and told me to hop on. I had this sick, bad feeling in my stomach. I said, "Where are the other kids?" He said, "We will go get them now. Just get on." He got more and more pushy, but didn't do anything too crazy, probably not wanting to bring attention to himself. I kept saying no, because I knew I was the last kid picked up. There would have been at least one other kid on that bus. You were very smart. Finally, I just said no enough that he shrugged and left. This is when I truly felt horrified. Minutes later, the real bus pulled up. I went to school, and I never told my parents. Looking back, they would have been pretty worried, and I probably should have told them. But I'll tell you one thing, if it was a big yellow school bus, that's oddly impressive. If a pedo was out trolling with legit school bus. Since this sparked a debate, yes, trolling can be used as slang to refer to a slow-moving car, referencing the fishing term. Oh my gosh, and then I guess nobody believed him, so he had to prove it. I mean, I've heard that before. But I don't think school buses in the country. I know in Ohio here, my step-grandfather, his neighbor had a school bus, and I think even he did because he was an old school bus driver. So when he retired, I don't know how it worked, but he took his school bus with him, and it was always in his huge barn. And he was too big of an a-hole to be any kind of nice to a child or adult for that matter. So I guess it's definitely possible. Definitely possible. So this is by Hive Jive Live. Send a link. July 15th, 1976, in Chowchilla, California. 3 armed men hijacked a school bus. They abducted the driver, 26 children, ages 5 to 14, and imprisoned them in a truck trailer buried in a quarry in Livermore, California. The bus driver and children managed to escape before the kidnappers could issue their ransom demands. All of the victims survived, but many suffered from PTSD. So, right here, now this is really strange. Oh, this is where they were kept in the warehouse, or what did he call it? Oh, in a truck trailer. So they took this. They must have taken the school bus somewhere. So you can see right there. That's where they were kept. I don't know. Any of this is scary. I think my camera is. There it goes. It was a little bit greasy. I should have done that grease test. Just kidding. Alright. I have my camera switched around for some reason. saw him. He saw a man with no, oh my god, this happened right in front of his father. The guy is standing there, made it to his house, and his whole part of his face fell. So his father, their father is thinking that this man had no face. He was saw the man with no face. The man was very drunk and his body was frozen. He was talking to himself. Je vais mourir, je vais mourir, which means I'm gonna die. The fact that his face was partially frozen might have saved his life, preventing him to lose too much blood. My father took him to the hospital, 25 kilometers from our house by car. He survived. So he saved his life. But to this day, my father is still blessing the fact that we never woke up the night with all the noise. Oh my gosh, can you imagine your child waking up and seeing this man with no face in your living room? Oh my gosh, that would be PTSD for sure for those little kids. Stop leaking. Moving on, moving on. By Genesis Pro Tech. So I went camping with some friends on a hill a few kilometers out in the woods from one of our friends' houses. There's a few hiking trails, four-wheel trails in the area that led up to the hill, so it's known by the locals. It was about midnight. We had a fire going, and we were just sitting down around, having a good time. That's it. Then the guy sitting across from me, there was four of us, yells, "Who are you?" I turn around and there's a man about 6 foot tall staring at us from the edge of the woods with a big rock in his hand. Oh my god. One guy knocked an arrow in the compound bow we had. The guy across from me grabbed the hatchet and pulled the knife off my belt, and I pulled the knife off my belt. We had no clue what we were doing, but the guy wouldn't say anything to us. He eventually backed into the woods, being outnumbered. Yeah, nobody slept that night, and we kept a very large fire going. Alright, there's 4 of you and 1 of him. Yeah, I wouldn't have slept, but you were lucky that there were more of him, and that crazy story. One of the ones I find to be the scariest. So he kills his victims very, very, let's just say, unpleasantly, hanging them by big hooks and holding them hostage, taking their belongings and letting them know they're going to die. So after we went camping, we got home, and needless to say, a couple of months after our camping trip, they found another body in the area we were camping in. Oh my gosh. That would have probably scared me enough to never camp again. Maybe, I don't know. That's pretty intense. Moving on. By Raincoats _George. This is what made me dislike camping as much as I used to. And it's not just camping alone, but even in large groups. I've had numerous situations occur where things just got sketchy. I remember camping with a large group of guys, drinking, having a good time when we walked back to our car that was parked just a few meters away. There was a guy sitting on a rock alone. It was 3 a.m. Now it's not like we were in some desolate area, but there were all kinds of messed up people that are out roaming around that you would never expect, and if they don't want you to see them, you won't. That is very, very true. One time at the camp I went to, we hiked 7 miles up the mountain to this abandoned fire tower. This tower was way up in the mountains, and reaching it by foot is no easy task. I don't know why, but tapping on the iPhone box is so satisfying. Sorry, I just thought I'd explain myself. Even getting there by car is tricky. Sure enough, late at night we see a man walking through the woods without a flashlight. How he did that boggles my mind. Night vision goggles. Because the place was covered with thorn bushes. I mean, in either instance, neither person caused any harm, but it gets you thinking about all the people you don't see that are out there with you. And it really can play mind tricks with you. Whenever I do go camping or hiking anymore, I always carry a firearm now. Oh yeah. I know to be as prepared as I possibly can. The only problem is that you're usually asleep, unless you're like me who wakes up at the slightest noise. So, a commenter says, "Thanks guys, I'm leaving soon for a backcountry trip in Maine with some friends. Now I'm not only pissing my pants, but I have a good campfire story for them. They're gonna hate me." That's actually... Moving on. That's actually very true. I wouldn't want somebody to tell me true, scary stories around a campfire about people coming up on them in the close spot, and some dude came out of the woods. He kept saying stuff like, "You gotta watch yourself down here. There are some bad people around here." And then when I asked who he was, he just said, "Don't worry about it. I'm nobody." Well, we were all really sketched out and basically told the guy to get out of there. But listen to this. A couple days later, a girl went off the rope swing and got really messed up. Someone put fishing hooks all over the bottom of the rope swing, and it took chunks of flesh out of her leg. Oh my god. Oh, that would be terrifying. Can you imagine getting on just a swing and having that happen? That's terrible. No, they had to know that kids were going to use that swing. Later we found out that the guy we met was just the guy that lived nearby, and although it felt creepy and he was drunk, he was harmless. He was really just trying to look out for us. There was also a really messed up family that lived up the road that he warned people about. I guess they would make drugs and things like that, and they believed to be inbred. They never came to town. About 5 years later, last year, that family beat some kid up with a log and kidnapped a girl at gunpoint, took her on a joyride. And he has a link to the story. Oh my gosh. See, and I would like, where is this? I would like to know where you are. Here, let me look, click on the story. It should tell. Burrell man charged in woman's alleged abduction. This is in 2013. Where is Burrell Township? Does anybody know? Let me look this up. Look up Burrell. It's in Maryland. I think, no, never mind. I lied. Search web. Burrell. Oh, dang. Burrell is in Pennsylvania. Okay. That's, a little... I mean, there's other Burrells, but I'm imagining this is in rural Pennsylvania. So, that's crazy. That's crazy. I'm sorry. There are some really, really crazy people out there. You've got to be careful. Got to be careful. It's just, you just have to always have your back. Look at the dog hair on me and my own hair. I couldn't find my roller this morning. I apologize. Alright. Well, moving on for sure. There are so many crimes that we are not privy to. I think I've said this before, but when I worked for the public defender's office as an investigator, I would say 1 out of every 30 murders would be reported in the news. And I just knew that because I had to interview once I was walking my dog in a park in London, Ontario. Now let me just explain this. There are houses that sit on the edge of the park and back to the Thames River and hiking trails. The day was pretty hot and my dog was thirsty. I brought him to the river to drink. We got down to the river and were behind a house with a large privacy fence that sat on the edge of the park. While my dog was drinking, I heard loud banging noises coming from the backyard like a hammer. I thought somebody was building a shed or something like that. All of a sudden the hammer stops and a man says, "Shut up. Nobody knows you're here," and the banging began again. What? Can you imagine hearing this? I froze in fear and then ran up the bank back into the park. I was now directly beside the house. This said creepy house. A man came out of the backyard gate in fatigues with a rusty-old wheelbarrow heading towards two quintessential kidnapping vans parked in front of the house. The man turned and noticed me looking at him as I was walking past. He set down the wheelbarrow and stared at me until I was out of the park. I immediately called the police when I got home, and I still have no idea what happened. So let's see if we can't sleuth at this a little bit. Let's see. Okay, so there is an article about London, Ontario. There was a serial killer, and not only is there one serial killer, it is the serial killer capital of the world at one time. What? And here's the article. Oh my gosh, this is nuts. Yeah. London, Ontario, serial capital of the world. I mean, this is back 10 years ago, but it must be really a place people can go and hide like Alaska. But even when my daughter and I went up to Banff, we took a tour, like a 10-mile hiking tour of all the different lakes, and it was nice because we could just look at the scenery and not drive, and the gal was really educated about everything in the area, and so many of us have, that they don't end up obviously in anything bad happening, but you know in your gut that you are definitely in danger. I mean, nobody sells that late at night. I'm sorry. I mean, that's very unsettling. I'm surprised that she actually opened the door. I guess when you live in an area that nothing happens, then you're more apt to trust people, or, kind of wonder what's going on. And I don't know, I kind of feel the opposite. If there's nobody around to help me, then I'm not gonna open the door for you unless I have a shotgun in my hand. Moving on. That's underscore amore. A_more. Similar thing happened to my mom. It was about 10 p.m. Gotta knock on the door. My mom got up and asked who it was through the door without opening it. And some guy is trying to give a sales pitch. She declined forcefully and watched him walk to the house across the street through the people. Before he knocked on their door, he put his hand on their doorknob and tested it. Scary people are out there, and for the love of God, do not open the door if a stranger wants to sell something to you at 10 p.m. Absolutely. But I don't care if it's in the middle of the day. You just do not. I mean, somebody can hurt you in the middle of the day, trust me. It's happened. Moving on. I was born and raised in North Dakota. Back in high school, a group of us would research murders that occurred out in the country. We would then go out to find the scenes and film the exploration at night. Okay, this is kind of cool. So this was about 2 years before Blair Witch Project came out. It was something to do while we got wasted on crappy beer and teenage bull crap, Eventually we ran out of places to go. North Dakota, a few people, a few murders, but there are some. And got really good at finding abandoned rural farmsteads by driving dirt roads and looking for the signs. Rut roads, deliberate tree groves, old mailbox posts were common markers. We were out looking when we spotted a tree grove that was out of place. Sure sign. Drove through the field and discovered an old but not too old house. It had padlocks on the outside doors that were knocked off pretty easily. We dispatched of them and entered the kitchen. Now, in our group there were 6 of us, all with flashlights, and we lit up the kitchen dining room like daytime. The table was the initial thing you noticed. It was strange because of how normal it looked. Set for a meal, and not a bowl was out of place. One thing was, we'd been in dozens of these houses, and each place, the settings were never house, we all started to realize that this house had not been moved out of. It had been straight up abandoned. Imagine locking the door to your house and never coming back. That's the state this house was in. Complete, unplanned departure. We went upstairs, split into 3 pairs to check out the 3 rooms. Ours was the closest, and obviously it was the young boy's room. I can't describe what it looked like too well because almost right away from the hall we heard the most horrifying scream I've ever had the misfortune of hearing. We went running into the hallway and we were all yelling questions at each other at the same time. After a few really long seconds, the 2 screamers caught their breath and said, "You have to go in and see." Oh my God, don't tell me, please don't tell me. Walking down the hall and through the doorway, I prayed I wouldn't act like a wussy in front of my friends. I should not have been concerned because the others were just as scared as I was. The room itself opened up to the left of the door frame, and centered on the right side of the room was a queen-size bed. Propped up on pillows with a blanket drawn to the waist, arms on top of the blanket. Worst of all, head turned slightly so it looked at you straight in the eyes when you entered the room. Oh my God, was a life-size porcelain doll. Oh my God. That's what? This is so freaky. Snow white skin, jet black hair, cold, dead eyes. The dead eyes lit up with her flashlights like she was waiting for us. If the head hadn't been turned, I would have excused it, but it was already turned. Ready for when we walked in. It had been ready for 20 plus years. We exited out there as quick as we could. Got down the stairs and into the car. It was during the ride we started to get even more creeped out when we realized that even though the house had been abandoned, someone had taken the time to set up that doll. Not packing food, clothes, or family photos. Setting up the doll was one of the last things done in this house. We researched their names because we had their mail. But we got nothing. No tragic car accident, no grisly massacre, no extended family. Just a weird time capsule in the middle of nowhere without any explanation of where these people went. There's no way that a whole family would exit that quickly without something terrible happening. I just don't believe that. Just because you research their name doesn't necessarily mean, because it was so long ago, that that mail belonged to them. So we found out that the country had taken possession of the land for non-payment of taxes, explaining the locks, but never bothered to track down any more information on what happened to these people. They must have never gone into the house because, to me, it felt more like a crime scene recently, which was 10 years ago. Now that seemed to be abandoned in a similar way as the post above, with everything in place. We entered through the garage with still stored family items. Some items I remembered: a nice fishing boat with the cover on it, snowblower, the metal cage, things people around here put around plants to stop animals from eating them, and there was an old, straight 6 engine in the corner with the head taken off. One of the wall of the garage looked to have collapsed in. At the back of the garage is a tiny, tiny room with a workbench where the head of the engine from the garage sat, with the valve drain half taken apart. Just beside the tiny workroom was the stairs to the first floor. Everything was covered in 1/2-inch thick layer of black rotten mess. At the time, all the items were still in the house, but many of the shelves had fallen over and their things were broken. The only honestly, truly creepy thing for me was a teddy bear face down on the ground with its back somehow absent of the layer of black rot. My friend then put his foot through the floor, so we got the hell out of there. We never did explore the top floor because the floors were so rotten. That's crazy. Moving on. Gritty spice. Working here as a paramedic, these are some of my favorites. I was dispatched to what went out as a simple assault call in a bad neighborhood. This was around 10 p.m. We arrived at the house to find a man standing behind a row of parallel parked cars in front of his house, yelling in a strange, high-pitched voice. The police were trying to calm him down. Our first assumption walking up to him was that this guy who was injured, but once we got the gurney around the parked cars, we saw what was really going on. A dead man was leaned up against a Mini Cooper, slouched in the gutter. I'll never forget coming around the car to find him. There was this really unsettling moment that lasted about 2 seconds, where I thought he was alive and staring at me. Then realizing he was looking through me. Then realizing he was dead. He was shirtless and had been stabbed multiple times. And these were brutal wounds. Most stabbings I've seen up until that point seemed to be simple penetrations, but this guy's chest and abdomen had been torn to shreds. It was horrifying. The guy standing on the curb was yelling that weird, warbly voice, crying, asking if his roommate would be okay. We started CPR and scooped him up and took him to the hospital, knowing that he was DOA. After the doctor pronounced him a couple of cops came over from the scene to square away business involving the victim. One of them really dropped a bomb on us. The story they had heard before our arrival was that the victim had left the house to have a smoke. When his roommate came out to check on him, he found him stabbed to death outside. But after we left for the hospital, someone noticed a trail of blood leading from the house to the curb, implying he had been stabbed inside. So when the police confronted the roommate about this, he managed to run inside, barricade himself in the house. There was actually a SWAT team that had situation. The person who had most likely brutally murdered our patient that night had been standing right behind me for most of the call. I know that paramedics see a lot of things, and I had dated one years and years ago, and the thing that he said to me that really sticks in my mind is that he said, eventually you're going to come up to a scene where somebody is dead and you're going to know them. And that just always sat with me, that realization that someday, if you work as a paramedic or firefighter long enough, you're going to run into somebody that has been in an accident or murdered or whatever, that are dead. Moving on. By deleted. My grandfather owns several forests around the village he lives in, and he drives through them every week to check how the trees are doing and whether something needs to be fixed. I must say my grandfather really loves his trees and has a sharp eye for any potential sickness or insect infestation that could pose a threat. So a decade or two ago, hitchhikers were very common, even in the thinning populated areas of Bavaria. So that's where he lives, Bavaria. He encountered them regularly and was happy to help. He literally picked up every single hitchhiker he found. However, one day he had a bad feeling about one without any reason at all. He dismissed this one hitchhiker standing on the side of the path. Later that day, there was a radio broadcast about a previously convicted murderer who killed somebody in the woods and got caught trying to flee by hopping into someone's car. Oh my gosh, he says just writing this down makes me shudder. Wow. Moving on. Sweet dish. So about 12 years ago, I rented an apartment from a friend of mine. He had recently bought it and had it completely renovated. He put it up for sale but couldn't find a buyer, so I offered to rent it in the meantime. After moving in, I realized there was something wrong with the lady next door. She was 45 or but about that, but looked much older. She would sit up all night listening to Christian radio stations and talking loudly to someone. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep. I went over to her place and asked her to please keep it down. She got a little aggressive, opened the door harshly to come out to give me her peace of mind, but that's when I got a quick peek. Her walls all had crosses painted on them in different colors, words like Jesus and angels scribbled everywhere. The windows were painted black, letting no light in at all. I could smell the damp, mildewy, yellow-stained 50-year-old carpets, dog, crap, and cockroaches scattered everywhere, but there was no dog. I was beyond shocked, but just said the only thing that came to my mind was, please keep it down. She looked at me and slammed the door, then turned up the radio even louder. I had my girlfriend stay over the next night. I wake up in the middle of the night and see a shadow of a person next to the bed looking at us sleeping. I think I'm hallucinating, as I usually do in the dark when I'm sleeping. "You should lock your door at night," she says, and walks out. The next morning I hear someone making strange noises below my bedroom window. It's my neighbor talking to herself in tongue. She has a plastic bag in her hand with her, oh my god, rotting, dead dog inside. It's hot as hell outside and I can smell the death from the bag. At this point, I'm scared. She's obviously insane. I go upstairs, knock on another person's door, and ask what in the world is going on. Now, the guy is just as scared as me. Apparently, she broke into his apartment one evening as well while he was watching TV with his kids. He got up from the couch to get a snack only to find her behind the couch, staring at him holding a power drill. Wow. So, the guy says, now I know what was in her hand when she was standing over his bed. At this stage, I'm crapping myself. I call the cops. They know all about her. Apparently, she's a violent schizophrenic and she hasn't taken her meds. Unfortunately, the police can't force her or enter her apartment without her permission because she owns it. The only thing they can do is get her when she goes outside. Now me, I sit up for the next 2 days waiting for her to run out of cigarettes. When I hear her leave at 2 a.m. to go across the road to the 7-Eleven, I immediately call the police. They have 3 cars and a special van unit over in less than 2 minutes. They restrain her and throw her in the van and drive off to some institution. In less than a minute, it's like she was never there. Thank God I never see her again, but I still have nightmares about her looking at us while we sleep. That is, the speaking in tongues did it for me. I don't know if anybody has gone to a church where they speak in tongues, but not that I have anything against it, but would be very unsettling having somebody do it outside my house in the middle of the night. Please, everybody, lock your doors. Please, lock your doors. So if anybody doesn't know what speaking in tongues is a nonsensical language that what I have been told is everybody's own special language with God. Or it doesn't have to be religious, I guess, but who knows? Moving on. We'll do a few more. Deleted. We went to a McDonald's on the way to the beach. When I was 12 or 13, we went to a McDonald's on the way to the beach. I went to use the restroom before I ate and washed my hands. Just as I started using the restroom, this guy comes in, walks to the urinal next to me, and stares at me. Does not use the restroom, just watches. I can see him out of the corner of my eye, his eyes locked onto my private area, what there was of it. I had a bathing suit on, so I'm doing the whole flop over thing. Guys, you know what I mean. So I can hide it. I can't stop it. I know though. Not sure why when you're a kid you can't stop your pee. Because you can now. He just smiled creepily as I finished to put things away and I washed my hands. He stood there smiling. I gave him one more look as I left the bathroom and never saw him again. I was with my friend's mom and I didn't say anything. I didn't want to get in trouble and really wanted to go to the beach. Obviously today that logic makes absolutely no sense. Moving on. Lady underscore Lostress. I have posted this before, but it fits this bill. I'm not a great storyteller, so bear with me. So a couple years back, my best friend and I went on a road trip to the States for a music festival. Met up with some friends. Saw a lot of things and whatnot. One of our friends comes back home with us. He needed to get back home for school with his buddies. Didn't want to head home yet. We decided to drive straight home in shifts. It took 24 hours for the full drive. Anyway, here's where my story starts. When I'm driving. I am driving the night shift around 2 a.m. It is a beautifully clear night, full moon, no clouds, middle of the summer, party type night. While noticing all of these conditions, I also noticed we have followed the GPS onto a back road and driven into a huge valley. Open fields, not another car or house in sight, and it is important to note that we have not seen anyone or any relating human into our presence for hours. 3 to 4 hours. It is. Upon entering the valley, we lose our satellite signal. We have no satellite radio, no GPS, and no cell signal. Cool beans. Doesn't really matter, as I know we follow this road for a couple more hours. About 20 minutes after entering this valley, and after losing all of our connection, we come upon a bridge. As we get closer, I see a car pull out on the side of the road. Not uncommon, people sleep in pullouts when they can. This is uncommon. What is uncommon is this car has all of its windows blacked out. With all the light from the moon, we should be able to see at least partially inside. But it was completely black, like limousine black. Getting closer, we also realize it has no license plate that we can detect. No big deal, we assume that it is abandoned out here in the boonies. That is until we pass this vehicle, and almost immediately its lights turn on. It pulls out behind us on the road. Now this is where it gets really creepy. This vehicle starts tailgating us in the middle of nowhere. We can't see who is inside. Again, we brush it off. Maybe he is lost. Needs to follow someone out of the area. Doesn't explain the windows being blacked out or the lack of license plate, however. This car follows us. I start to get an uneasy feeling. Subtle at first, but growing stronger. Soon I get an all-out get the F away from this vehicle ASAP feeling. I find it important to note that I do not frighten easily. I do not panic, and I only have gotten this feeling in times when I know for a fact my life is in danger. I push these feelings aside as it seems like the silliest response to a possibly explainable situation. That is until I see something in the middle of the road. Almost on cue, this car backs off as I and my companions, one of whom was asleep beforehand, tried to make out what is in the middle of the road. Coming closer, we see what looks to be a body laying in the middle of the lanes. This is not a big road. I said it was also a back road, still paved, but very narrow. At this moment, and at the sight of what appears to be a body in the road ahead, we start flipping out. I in no way am stopping for no one in this desolate, isolated area with a serial killer van behind us. There are no other vehicles around other than him, and I can see no housing or lights for as far as the eye can see. No cell service, no satellite, nothing. I quickly tell the others that I'm not stopping and I'm going around or through. By this time, we are almost on top of it. There's no room to go around as there are no shoulders on the road and deep, deep ditches on either side. Now we are close enough to see that this is not a body, it is a scarecrow, and I drive over top and onwards. You're lucky it didn't have nails in it. This car, small enough to go around it, continues to follow. I speed up, it speeds up. I slow down, it slows down. Until I punch it. After about 2 minutes of this, the car slows down, does a U-turn, and drives back. Now my passenger turns to me and says, I swear I saw spikes in that thing. Just what I said. Luckily for us, we were driving a huge truck. The wheel span was bigger than the scarecrow on the road, and we never even touched it. It was another half an hour before we reached cell service, and the satellite picked back up. It was, and we remember during this time there we had been seen a couple missing people reported in our province. Ones who were on vacation and driving home from the States who never made it home or were never found. Okay. Alright, I'm really freaked out. Wow. I and my passengers fully believe that we escaped some crazy, quote-unquote, wolf creep type of death for ourselves. I mean, this is absolutely insane. They did report it to the police. They were unable to pinpoint the exact location. Now you see, this is my whole theory behind serial killers. They don't kill out of anger or just off a whim or just to go and kill for something stupid like money. They kill to kill. So the thing is that they have pre-planned their destination. Alright? They have already prejudged how you're gonna react to seeing a dead body. Most people would probably have stopped out of curiosity to possibly be good Samaritans. Now, the one thing I think that saved this young group of people was the fact that this guy followed them. If he had waited until they were out of sight and then started following them, the kids probably would have never thought anything was weird and stopped for what they thought was a dead body. He could have then pulled up on them. That's what completely set her off. And of course, he had to have known that that specific area was not able to be detected on GPS. And yes, I learned when we went to Montana hiking in the Beartooth Mountains that there are places in the United States that are absolutely off-grid, off the map. You could not find them, or people could not find you. Moving on, a couple more. These are so good, I'm sorry, I just can't stop. neighbors stop as it wasn't funny. They all said they didn't touch anything. The next morning, even more stuff had been moved, and she started to get worried. Again, she told her housemates to stop, but each one swore they hadn't touched a thing, and now they were freaking out. The fourth night, she woke up during the middle of the night, looked over in the darkness. She could see a dark figure sitting at her desk. She obviously freaked out, ran out of the room, looked back briefly, called the police. The police turn up and they unlock her locked door. Sure enough, there is a guy, probably in his early 20s, sitting at her desk, calm as anything. The police arrest him and take him away. A couple of days later, they find out that the guy was actually a mentally handicapped person who lived at a care center home not far down the road. His mother, who was his full-time care watcher, had looked after him until her death a year or so earlier, when he was then moved into the home. Oh, this is kind of sad. He had been a missing person for a few weeks now, and it turned out that the girl's house and her friends lived in used to be his house, and in particular her bedroom used to be his. Oh, that's actually really sad. He eventually told the police that when he ran away from the house, his old house was somewhere. He managed to get in, spent the whole time there, 2.5 weeks, sleeping under the girl's bed, coming out at night while she slept to move her stuff, so it was like how he had it when it was his bedroom. She moved out straight away, and that's when she moved in with my friend. But that's really very sad to me. Moving on. Jesus de Sade, or Jesus de Sade, whatever. It's D-E-S-A-A-D. It was 6 or 7 years. I was 6 or 7 years old, in my parents' apartment, heading towards the kitchen. There's a small hallway corridor that starts with the front door. After 5 feet, there's the door to the kitchen to the right, and the door to the living room to the left. 2 feet further away, their corridor turns to the right and continues to the bedroom from where I was approaching. I go towards the kitchen where my mom is talking on the phone, cooking with the oven on and the fan to the oven on. At the end of the corridor in front of me, I see the front door opening. I halt because of the door magically opening in my mind, being 6 or 7, but it stops because of the chain holding it. So I'm thinking it was my dad. It's about 11 in the morning. I think my dad will close the door and ring the doorbell for my mom to open up the chain. It was weird because I hadn't heard the key turning. Except nobody rings the doorbell, and an enormous hairy hand that definitely doesn't belong to my father tries to pull out the chain. My 6-year-old mind immediately understands that something is wrong. I rush to slam the door with my entire body while I whine a little, "No." And I would have managed it if the burglar didn't think to put his foot as an extra stopper. Here's me slamming against the door with all my 6 or 7-year-old strength, panicked out of my mind, and then putting all my weight against the infernal piece of wood, with a huge burglar on the other side trying to keep the door open so he can pull the chain off, fingers trying to grasp the end off the chain. my 7th grade scream when I was about to give up hope, and I heard my mom tell the person on the other end of the line she'll call her back because I've done something and she needs to check on me. So the burglar heard her and let me close the door. My mom arrives and demands to know what is going on and what I think I'm doing. I'm hysterically crying at this point, only able to mutter a few coherent words, trying to point at the door saying burglar out or something like that. My mother, not getting the hint, comes over and tries to open the door to see what the fuss is about, with me still pushing against the door with my back. As soon as I realize what she's about to do, I try to push her away, crying, sobbing, "Don't open the door. There's a burglar outside." I had to fall on my ass, then on my knees, and beg her again, trying to push me aside before she decided to change her mind and look at the people instead of opening the door. She looks through it in a hurry, starts to say, "See, there's nobody there," and I see her very annoyed face turning pale as a sheet of paper. She grabs me, pushes me away from the door, and tells me to get her the phone. I rushed to the kitchen, and I heard her yell through the door, "I can see you crouching. You're behind the door, and I'm not going to open. I'm calling the police right this minute." This guy was behind the door, crouching as low as he could, so my mother could not see him, not making a single sound. Thinking she would open the door, my mom called the police, and after 5 minutes of my mom issuing threats through the door, we heard somebody creeping away from the hallway and down to the building entrance and outside the door. My mom was white as a sheet, not making a sound or expressing any emotion throughout the whole ordeal. It was as if she was scared out of her mind. I'm sure she was scared because she didn't believe you at first. About a half an hour later, my father comes home, oblivious to the whole thing. When my mom told him what happened, he went and got a new lock and a better door chain. The police arrived that afternoon, a full 5 hours later, even though the police station is 10 minutes away. The burglar was never caught. I was so shocked that I completely suppressed this memory until about 5 years ago, when a friend of mine tried to show me this trick he'd learned with an old credit card, where he can open any unlocked door. I accepted the challenge because it seemed too unlikely he'd succeed. So I waited on the inside and heard him struggling a bit and put the chain in place as a joke for when he admits defeat. Now I am waiting for him to open the door. I'm just standing there. He actually does, and it is silent. I see before me almost the exact scene I witnessed 20 years earlier, a hand trying to pull the chain out. All the memories rush back to the surface. I completely freak out for the rest of the afternoon. Throughout my entire adult life, up to that point, I thought that simply closing the door behind me was enough. What? You've got to lock your doors. You've got to lock your doors, everybody. And I also thought that when I would lock my door, just the handle, it was enough because you would need a key to open it. I'd never left my door way back in time, but these are good. Wow. I was in my final year in high school. About 6 years ago, I was in my final year of high school. Written by Deleted. And due to the weird timetable that 12th grade had at my school, we regularly had 2.5-hour breaks between classes, early finishes, and longer lunch breaks. Behind my house was about 20 minutes away from the school. And I would usually just walk away from school, and I would walk home either by myself or with a friend and chill out until we had to head back. That's why they have all these college programs in place now. My school is My school is located on the outskirts of the city, and my house is a little bit further out. I lived on 40 acres and up a dirt road. Along the dirt road I had been passing along, a really foul smell about 5 minutes away from my house. I couldn't tell where the smell was coming from, but it was definitely close to the road. I had passed the smell about 4 times over roughly a week of school, but figured it was a dead animal due to the area. But I got curious. After an exam, I was walking home with a friend, and the smell was worse than ever. So as you do as a teenager, we decided to walk into the grass to search for whatever the smell was. We ended up finding a black garbage bag that was completely blown up like a balloon about 5 meters from the road. As a joke, I threw a rock at it and it popped. My dog is snoring so loudly, I'm sorry. It popped and it shot out this foul white goo, and immediately my friend and I started retching. We ran away as fast as we could, laughing, vomiting, back to my place. I didn't think anything of it, as I figured it was a cat or something that somehow someone had dumped there. I remember walking back from school the next week by myself, and there were mounted police on their horses walking down the road slowly and near one of the entrances to my property. There was a dog squad with sniffer dogs walking around. I didn't take much notice of all the police and what they were doing, but literally, as soon as I got closer to the area that we had found the bag, I had a weird sinking feeling in my gut. I thought, oh shit. The bag ended up being the body of a girl been murdered, was dumped along the fence line of my property. I still feel sick when I think about it. That's freaking awful. I wonder where are you? I would love to have a article about this. It had to be. See if I can do some sleuthing here. News article. Hope he doesn't respond, but oh, here we go. have a story to tell. First off, screw you for this thread. Retelling this is probably going to give me nightmares. But I have to tell it. When I was about 10, my family of 6 lived in an extremely small apartment. Wow, 2 bedrooms upstairs and in the living room. When I was tired of my siblings, I would sleep downstairs. One night I am lying on the couch, facing the front door, watching the sky through the window by the door when a face shows up in the window, illuminated by a lighter. I'm frozen. I stop breathing and the face goes away. I'm momentarily relieved, thinking it was maybe our druggy neighbor seeing if my parents were still awake when it shows up again. I try to scream. When I open my mouth, nothing comes out, not a sound. The person then kicks in the door and walks in the room. What? He smiles at me, goes towards the kitchen, and comes out of the kitchen with a knife. My dad wakes up and makes it down the stairs, and the guy books it out of there. What? I still can't sleep easily on the couches to this day. You know, it's funny. I mean, it's not funny, but it's interesting that he brings this up because Ted Bundy said that he had actually picked, I'm sorry, not Ted Bundy, the Gainesville killer, I can't ever remember his name, I just know him by that, said he picked one of his victims out. The only reason he picked that house and her was that the sliding glass door had been left open and he saw her sleeping on the couch. Now, if she had locked the door, she would have still been alive to this day. I can't even imagine. I had some friends that were going to U of F at that time, and I just remember how scared everybody was. It was crazy, crazy stuff. Continuing on, in self we trust. When I was 6 years old, I was outside on a slip and slide. I remember this, with my next door neighbor. A car slowed down when he got close to us, rolled down the window. When he got closer, started talking to me, but he was really talking quiet, where I couldn't make out what he was saying. So I walked closer in, and he asked, "Don't you go to the school down the street?" I said naively, "Oh yeah, why?" "Because my son said he recognized you." I heard the car door unlock, and there was a man, his mid-30s, sitting in the back seat. Right as the door started to open, I feel someone grab me by my collar of the shirt and yank me into their arms. It was my neighbor's mom. She dragged me all the way back to her house. And as soon as the driver saw her, he peeled off. When we got back to the house, she called the cops immediately. I didn't even realize how close I was to getting kidnapped until I saw my mom crying and heard about what happened. Wow. Oh my gosh. You know, I'm thinking the same thing. This guy says, "Damn, there's a lot of close calls on this thread." A+ for the neighbor's mom. Glad she was paying attention. years ago, when I was 14 or so, I was walking my dog, a hyper Chesapeake Retriever mix. I was in a rural suburban area. It was fairly quiet. A car would breeze by once every 5 minutes or so. An old gray Toyota Corolla passed by, nothing unusual, but a minute later this car passes again, and this time the car slows down when it's coming towards me, giving me the impression the guy's checking me out. The guy ends up passing up and down the road many more times, stalking me. I end up faking having a cell phone call and talking to someone on the other end. In case you got any ideas, why didn't you call 911? The dog gave me a sense of security. After the 6th or 7th time this guy passes by, I duck into the woods and hide. He swings by twice more, and I wait 10 more minutes to see if he comes back. He doesn't. I end up running back home with a very confused and disappointed dog. Later on the news, there's a story that matched my stalker's description, and the man was charged with attempted R-word. I could be wrong, it could not have been him, but it was a little bit too coincidental. I was on the same road in the same area, just about 5 miles down the way. Yeah. The guy had no good intentions. I promise you, we give people too many chances. Too many chances. Moving on. Yay, Kirkers. Yeakirkers. When I was in middle school, my friends and I were hanging out on a trampoline in the backyard late at night. Maybe like 11 p.m. or so, we used to do that. The backyard's all connected, meaning there is trees and small fences separating them, but you can walk through. Some guy comes through and asks if we have a little orange tabby cat. We tell him no. He said he lives around the corner. If we see the cat, he will give us a reward. Okay, cool, whatever. We think nothing of it and go back to talking about Pokemon cards and why Shiraza's got on paper. No joke, 2 minutes after this guy leaves, his little car wanders through, and we think, this little cat he meant wanders through, and we think, is that the cat he was talking about? My friend grabs it, and we all proudly march to the guy's house to collect a reward. The guy is sitting on the front porch, and we bring the cat to him. He's so excited and says, "Oh, I have the reward inside. Just come in and I'll give it to you." This kind of sketched us out. We decided to go. 2 of us. 2 stayed out. He said, "Oh, if you don't come in, I can only give the reward to the ones that come." He was going to give us $100 a person to go in. Still, we had 2 guys go in and take what felt like forever, but they came out and had $200 with them. They said there was something that felt wrong. I feel as though if we all went, we would have been killed, but keeping 2 outside that knew we were in there was enough to deter him. Still a weird occurrence. You never know. I mean, he could have put the cat there to walk through after he asked 2 guys. I think it's weird that 2 So my friend and I decided to go explore this old group of houses. I would say probably built in the 30s. The main house was 3 stories, so overgrown a full-grown tree was blocking the door. Naturally, the only other way to get in through was through the cellar doors. We go down using nothing but our phone lights, and it wasn't really all that scary. The ceiling was low, about 5 feet high, so we go to the second floor, and once again there's nothing, no furniture, trash, just nothing. So we go upstairs. Same story. However, at this point, the 2 of us realize the place is spotless. Well, that's weird, and has none of the normal dust and dirt. Immaculate, which really creeped us out. Who has been there cleaning the inside, but not taking care of the outside? Like, that is really strange, with no furniture or anything in it. We go upstairs, nothing once again. We, however, notice a piece of plywood has been screwed into the wall, so obviously we rip it off to see what lies behind. What we find is the stairs to the attic. When we went to the attic, there was a single chair sitting facing out of the only window up there. I'm superstitious and I'm scared shitless, but my friend sits down in the chair, realizes that it's placed facing the roller rink across the highway. Now that is creepy. That's really strange. So there's like a peeping Tom that's watching these kids from afar. So they went into another house and they really didn't find anything but a conveyor belt and hooks hanging everywhere. What? So this is a group of houses, right? From the 30s. All kind of together, all disheveled on the outside, but immaculate on the inside. The first house just has a rocking chair in the attic, and the second house has nothing but a conveyor belt, hooks hanging from the ceiling. The creepy thing, it was once again spotless, like I said. Wow. We go upstairs and it's filled with red leather books entitled The Book of Knowledge. Another story behind how this was particularly interesting to me, dealing with another abandoned house. We go up into the attic and once again there's another chair. Those are the same group of houses. But the chair this time is facing the steps we had just come up. The other thing was it was surrounded by fox skulls. So by this point we are just freaking out. We are freaking out. This was once a chicken farm, and the farmer would or should try take his chickens and save the skulls as souvenirs. Okay, so we scrambled downstairs and figure we still have to check the basement. This is in the 3rd house. When we go down there, it's filled with toys. Many of the toys were outside types of toys, Tonka trucks and such. So odd, not creepy really. So this is the 2nd story in the 3rd house. So after we leave the chicken processing house, we decide to check out all the campers on the property. In total, there are 5. None of them are standing upright. They are all leaning against the trees on their side or upside down. We walk into the first and largest one, about 25 feet long. It is filled with newspapers. My friend picks up one of the newspapers, and it is dated 2013, 12 years ago. And at that point, we noped out of there. We plan on going back this weekend, actually, so I may have a news story. I don't think any of that sounded good. From the first house, looking over the skating rink, to the second house that had all the hooks and things hanging with a conveyor belt, and then the third house that had all the fox skulls and chicken heads, what? And the third house had the chair facing the stairs this time. Now, I don't really find the caravan or the trailers particularly strange, and the fact that the newspapers were dated at the time a year before. It was 12 years ago from now, but it was a year before when they were there. I don't know why that made them scared and nothing else did. I would have been scared from the rocking chair sitting in the immaculate house staring at the roller rink. That would have scared me. Alright, do we have time for short one? Deleted. Coming home late from a friend's house in a really bad area of Los Angeles. I mean, streets where gangs were infested. I used to walk around with a hammer in my waist because I couldn't get a gun. An old station wagon with all the windows blacked out by aluminum foil pulls up, and an old man looks at me, uses his hand to beckon me to come in. I showed him the hammer. He just keeps beckoning. I got the creeps and start running, cutting through a park. He was already waiting for me. On the other side, I had to jump a couple of fences to lose him. He looked like a weirdo. Scariest experience I ever had. And that's coming from somebody who walks through the gang-infested streets of LA. was so immune to all the crime that was actually going on. I don't think there's more crime now necessarily, but I think we hear about it because of social media. Excuse me. Okay, this is terrifying, absolutely terrifying. They do not go into specific detail, but I don't know what I would do if this happened to me. Highlander Golf 23. It is about 2 a.m. Our neighbor is ringing the doorbell frantically, banging on the door. Finally, my dad wakes up, opens the door. She is screaming inconsolably something about her brother who is mentally ill, and then she says words I will never forget. He murdered all of them. Every one of them. Apparently he had murdered her parents, locked her in the closet. He thought she was having a nightmare, but it turns out she was telling my dad the truth. The cops were called, and I watched them pull the bloody bodies out. It was the scariest thing that ever happened to me. Her brother is now in the insane asylum, but the neighbor still lives there. Oh, interesting. I hope it was really him that did it and not her, that used him as an excuse. Oh, so there's an article. Okay. Oh, but it goes to nothing. It looks like it was a long time ago, so it won't show me. But there is an article. And it happened southcoasttoday.com. Apps. Oh, Palm Beach County. Wow. Okay. Lived there for 35 years. Well, that's crazy. I know what BBC is. Palm Beach County. Well, I guess we should just continue. Why not, right? Spartan gained 10 years ago. I was walking with my brother one night. We were returning home from a game he had. It was probably 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I was maybe 10. For some perspective, I'm now 18, going on 19 in a month. We're approaching the apartment building I live at. We saw a figure. He was probably the size of an average man. Not surprisingly, the darkness conceals his upper body, including his face. We stopped dead in our tracks. Usually security guards patrol the grounds at this time, but their rounds started at 11. This really shouldn't have scared us, but he started to run right for us. I mean, sprint. He was running really fast. My older brother screamed at me to run. He chased chased us for an entire length of the street until my older brother told me to go under a fence that is arching above the ground, perfect for our sizes. We were terrified as we saw him try to climb over, but luckily we were very close to home. A week later, we found out that a child went missing the night after we escaped. To this day, the child has never been found. That's crazy because they got away. I'm sure that guy had nothing good in store for them. I'm sure it was the same guy. There's not too many people that actually hang out at that time of night and started chasing after you. I mean, if I love how people think just because something bad didn't happen to them that it wouldn't have, because people don't just normal people don't do that. That's not a normal human reaction when you see somebody is to run after them, especially that time of night. So, going deeper. Moving on. Plumpkin unicorn. I basically kept this to myself most of my life. 10 years ago, when I was 15, I'm a female for reference. My family owned an ice cream store. I had been working very late. It was about 1:30 in the morning when I was leaving to catch the last bus home. I got to the stop and had to wait 11 minutes for the bus to arrive. This was a reasonably safe area. Only issue was there were lots of bars, lots of drunk people. There were about 20 and the other was middle-aged. These two guys that were at the bus stop when I got there. This is all I remember about them. When I arrived, the younger man moved to sit in front of some bushes about 20 feet away. Okay, that's not normal. And the older man came and sat on the bench right next to me. He made small talk. Nothing exciting, but clearly very drunk. He told me that his friend had drank too much and they needed my help. He told me to go make sure his friend was not drowning in his own vomit. I look over to the younger man, but now he was sitting in the bush. Like actually in it. I told the older man that all I could do is call an ambulance, but he refused. Now at this point I'm horrified. There is no one else in sight, so I stood up and moved towards the street lights, 'cause they can't kill you if you're standing under a light, was my logic. This is when he got agitated. He starts demanding that I go to his friend in the bushes. I knew this was not going to end up well. The bus was still 6 minutes away. I looked around for anyone to help me, but he knew what I was doing. I was holding a sundae cup filled with Smarties from the ice cream shop. From here on, everything is a little bit blurry. I remember that he smacked the cup out of my hands, then grabbed my arm. That's when I saw my salvation. There was a small bundle of cars starting to come around the corner. I ripped out of his grip and tried to jump into the street, hoping someone would stop. But even as drunk as he was still faster than me. Tackled me to the ground, hiding me from the traffic. He picked me up from behind with my arms pinned to my chest. Started carrying me to the bushes. I kicked and screamed as loud as I could, but I was overpowered. I remember getting to the bushes and being grabbed by his friend. I knew I was about to be rewarded. The next few seconds are the most fuzzy. I heard tires screeching and men yelling. I was thrown to the ground with anarchy around me. I don't know how many people were there. Next thing I know, I'm being carried like a baby onto the bus that showed up early. Possibly the only reason I'm still alive. I remember looking out the window and seeing maybe 5 or 6 men, bus passengers, kicking the crap out of the 2 guys that had accosted me. I lost consciousness at this point, a mix of stress, shock, and a concussion I received at some point. I was taken to the hospital and both men were arrested on the scene. I was never asked to testify, but an officer visited me a few months later to tell me they had both men sentenced for 14 years for this and other crimes. My heart has never beat as fast as it did that evening. Wow, okay. Now that was heavy. I have no words except for I'm sorry this happened to you. But if it is any consolation, you probably saved many other people and helped solve cases that were about to go cold because they couldn't find who was doing this. So, should we keep reading? It's so quiet in the house today. So, I deleted. This was 10 years ago, so just keep that in mind. This happened a couple of nights ago, which would be 10 years ago. I know this is going to sound completely fake, but I swear on my soon-to-be child, this actually happened. You know, people say this, but I had a creative writing teacher that always told me nothing is stranger than the truth. It's around 12:30 and we're hanging out around my town. A couple of college kids. We are a group and there's not a lot to do at night around where we live. So this is pretty much all we do. What seems to be out of nowhere, an extremely drunk man comes stumbling towards us. He asks us, "Can you help me find my house?" This guy is wearing overalls and a trucker hat, and that's it. So already super sketchy, I would say so. I'm about to say no when one of the girls we're with says, "Yeah, sure, we'll help you find your house." What is she talking about? No, I'm thinking. Now we have to walk this guy all the way to his house. We begin our walk, and all the way this guy is stumbling along the street, telling us all the kinds of alcohol he has had to drink, and all the kinds he has at his house and whether we want to come drink with him. He would love it. We tried to change the topic, so I asked him, "So, what are your plans for tonight?" And his answer scares the crap out of me just thinking about it. He literally turns right to our faces and says, "Oh, I'm just gonna kidnap and kill 3 kids." Right to our faces. As you can imagine, at this point, I'm on edge about this drunk overall wearing a psycho that door leading to his house. After 20 minutes of walking, we finally reach his house, and the thing is, straight out of a horror movie, it's a pink Victorian era house. It looks like a murder house if I've ever seen one. Anyway. The guy thanks us and starts asking us if we're sure we don't want to come in and drink with him. The girl that initially decided we would take him back to his house politely declines, and he starts walking towards her, getting more insistent. So she turns around and promptly speed walks the heck away. I yell at the guy while he keeps trying to convince us to come in. We start running away from him, back the way we came. He didn't chase us, luckily, but it's terrifying to think what he really wanted to do. I mean, do you think he really wanted to kill us? I don't know. I honestly believe that he was faking being drunk. I was kind of thinking that. If we would have been stupid enough and accepted his invitation, I honestly believe something would have happened to us. This guy was crazy, acting drunk, trying to lure kids into his house with promises of alcohol. Something wasn't right. Okay. That's super scary for one, and I'm sorry you had to go through that. But I find it even scarier that he was so arrogant that he had the nerve to tell them what he wanted to do to them. Moving on. So the following is 100% true. My parents bought a cabin in the Washington mountain range. My mother and sister would go there and spend weekends. I remember my mother talking about how they would wake up and the side door of the cabin would be open. They changed the locks, but it continued. That was odd. What was odd was we never arrived to find the door opened. It only opened when someone was staying in the cabin. Summer or winter, it didn't matter. I laughed it off, thinking they probably left it open or they didn't close it properly and wind blew it. Being young and adventurous, I decided to spend the night in the cabin during the winter. The cabin was not heated, but did have electricity and a small wood stove. I drove my Jeep out there after work and got to the cabin after dark. I arrived and a light snow had started to fall. It was very cold and I was already regretting going because it was 13 degrees Fahrenheit. I quickly lit a fire, stoked it to produce as much heat as possible. I closed the door and locked it, pulling in several times to ensure it was closed and locked and not going to open in the middle of the night. As I was laughing at the stories of being open in the morning, right? I climbed into bed, put on an extra quilt to keep me warm, and quickly fell asleep. saw the door open and turned 90 degrees to see a tall, lizard-like demon with glowing red eyes staring at me. I immediately woke up from the dream, and I was scared. Here I am out in the middle of nowhere by myself, and I'm having nightmares. Great. Then notice that it's very cold, so I climb out of bed and walk towards the other room to relight the fire. As I enter the room, I turn in the darkness. I can see the door sitting wide open. Oh my god. I just got chills. Oh my gosh. So now I know that they were not lying or making it up. Wow. Snow had blown in on the floor. The nightmare was coming true. Playing out exactly. And the next part was I had to see a large demon. I let out a yell and fumbled for the light switch like a madman. My mind was racing. There was nothing there. I looked at the snow and didn't see any footprints or evidence of tampering. In my engineering mind, I assumed the heating of the structure caused some structural shift and the door popped open. I still didn't go back to the cabin for quite some time. A few years later, a house was built directly across the street. A few months after the new owners moved in, I walked over and introduced myself. We chatted for a little while and I asked how he and the family liked the place. He said he loved the area, but it was taking the kids some time to get used to living in the country. He smiled and said they're a bit spooked by it all. My curiosity went right to the door in my mind. Spooked, huh? Yeah, they think a monster comes into the rooms at night. I turned white as a sheet at that point. Then the man says, and for some reason, must be the wind or that my wife doesn't lock the door, but our back door is always open. That gave me chills. These are scary the deeper you get. Oh my gosh. Alright, let's keep going. I have to keep going. Robo Gandalf. Alright, so ROBOGANDAIF, I think. ALF. Sorry, Robo G and Alf. Okay, well, I need my glasses. I worked as a security guard for a mall. I was stuck with the night shift. The car was broken, so I rode a bike around the outside of the mall. About midnight when I heard someone yelling for help and waving his arms towards me. I pedaled like a maniac, trying to get to him. He looked 17 and poorly dressed for the season. It was winter out. I asked what's wrong, and he tells me my friend won't get up. Alright, let me call someone. Reached for my phone to call 911, but then the guy grabbed onto me and another man came out of the bushes near us with a gun pointed to my head. Oh my god. Long story short, I got mugged at gunpoint while they handcuffed me with my own handcuffs. Oh my gosh. That's terrible. Continuing on. was 17, 18 years old, walking home really late from a friend's house. I was walking along one of the main streets from my hometown when this car pulls up from a really dark residential street. The driver sees me and motions me over. I walk over because I'm a dumbass. He asks if I know how to get to the next town. I say, yeah, just take this main street all the way down. Once you get over the bridge, you're pretty much there. Oh, I don't know where this bridge is, he says. Hop in, show me. What? I'm thinking to myself. It's at the end of the street. He then asks me if I want to make $20, and I just stare at him. I like to suck D, he said with really bugged out eyes as he makes a sucking motion with his hands and mouth. I was frozen with shock. I shook my head. He didn't say anything and sped off down the main street. I took a bunch of shortcuts I knew through the residential areas and pretty much booked it all the way home. I've never ran that fast back home in my life. Wow. Continuing on. MS-CNI Daria, so Miss-Daria. I was in the Grand Canyon a few weeks ago, camping in a tent with some friends. Around 11 o'clock at night, I was still awake, but everyone else asleep. Suddenly, a woman started screaming from what sounded like a few campsites over. They weren't joking around, or they were very good actors, because it sounded terrifying. They screamed for about 10 seconds. At first, 2 or 3 of them, then eventually just one. The screaming stopped, and I heard someone much closer to our tent start running. Then a car door slammed, but the car never started. No one else woke up, and I was too scared to move, even get to my phone. I didn't fall asleep until the sun was coming up. In retrospect, it was probably something like an elk really close to their tent, as opposed to, an axe murderer. Since this was a decently populated campground, and I didn't hear anything after the incident. What I think is odd is that it was one by one the females stopped screaming. I know that foxes can sound like babies or sometimes screaming people, but I don't know. And they're all talking about the foxes. They seek her there. So moving on to they seek her there. When I was 8 or 9, my family took a trip with my dad to Toronto because he was going for business. He would do this often, take us on trips with him instead of being gone for long periods of time. We get a nice hotel, my parents, myself, and my 2 brothers, one 7, one only 9 months old. The hotel is one of the biggest I'd ever seen at that age. In my opinion, it would be hard to keep running into the same people all day long in this complex. otherwise unassuming, but their behavior was definitely strange. They offered to feed my youngest brother for my mom while she ate her breakfast. My mom was a bit overprotective with us. That's just being a good parent. I was surprised when she acted so calm but firm in telling them, no thank you. But they insisted twice more before leaving us to it and exiting the cafe. Later on, my mom was taking us to this shopping complex that was underneath connected to the hotel. We see the same couple from the morning. They were following us through part of the mall. My mom saw them and made us stop and go into a store until they passed and left. At this point, my 7-year-old brother and I are looking at each other and thinking that this isn't normal. My mom decides that this might be a weird coincidence. Later we decide to go back to the hotel and go swimming. The pool is huge, so large that it stretches from indoors to outside. While my brother and I are in the water, my mom is the littlest one with her sitting on a deck chair. Lo and behold, the couple is at the pool as well. They're sitting right across the pool from my mom, staring at her. She tells us shortly after that we should leave and go back to the hotel room because my dad will be back soon, and we will go to dinner. Again, my brother and I are thinking that this is strange despite how young and naive we were. Kids have a good sixth sense, though. The best part is when my dad finally returns to the hotel room, he knocks and doesn't announce himself. My brother and I run into the bathroom and close the door behind us because we assume it's that crazy couple. I'm gonna be honest, they probably wanted the baby, especially since they offered to feed him. So, this is creepy as hell considering people do kidnap babies. In my city, Melbourne, Australia, about 10 years ago, a couple decided they want another kid. So they thought they would just go and get a new baby. They picked a woman taking her 3-week-old daughter out for her first ever outing at a supermarket. Kneecapped her and snatched the baby. The baby was missing for 40 hours. While they took her to friends in the country who were naturally very suspicious considering their friends had not been pregnant, but suddenly show up with the baby. Turns out the baby was actually the daughter of a well-known gangland figure. So I think when this got out in the media, it must have freaked the kidnappers out, and they took the baby back to the city. Then left her in an abandoned house overnight. A jogger heard her crying the next morning. You know, there are so many true crimes about how people either kidnap babies or kill pregnant women because they either want a baby, can't have a baby, or have told their significant other they're pregnant and don't know how to break it to them that, they're not, and they've been faking it. Did you know there is a website called fakeapregnancy.com that you can actually buy fake positive pregnancy tests, a belly, sonograms? It is disturbing. Absolutely disturbing. Absolutely. Let me see if I can find one more good one. Growing up, this is by Mode wakes me up. I hear the creaking back stairs and slow, light footsteps. I wake up more. Initially, I thought I was hearing things, but the sound is real. They stop and I hear a light creak. Whoever is out there is trying to push the door open. Now remember, my bedroom is right by the kitchen. I heard another creak, this time louder. Then the doorknob is jostled while the door strains some more. More silence. I hear the someone leave and screen doors squeak open and close again. At this point, I'm scared. I quietly get out of bed and wake up my mother. She got mad I was waking her up. I told her what had happened. She tries to convince me I'm dreaming. At this point, I'm freaking out, crying because I thought someone was trying to break in when suddenly, bam, 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 gunshots ring out. I hit the floor. My mom runs for the phone, dials 911. They came from the neighbor's house. The police show up. The neighborhood is lit up with the blue spinning lights and the cops are yelling at someone. We stay far, far away from the windows on the side of the house. After a while, it goes quiet. My mother went to look out and to see what was going on. The police had a guy handcuffed on the ground. When the police entered the neighbor's house, only to find the person living there was shot dead. We later learned that the guy was shot while sleeping. When the burglar broke in, he woke the guy up. The guy living there got up to check on the noise and got shot by the burglar. Can you imagine if his mom went out? Wow. That's so scary. These are all so good. I hate to lose where I'm at, since I have come so far. Binary_omelet was driving from Atlanta, Georgia to Lexington, South Carolina with my girlfriend to visit my parents. I like to drive at night since there are less people on the road. At around 3 a.m. or so, we were making good time. I'd stopped at a gas station and picked some coffee up for us. We were due in about an hour. My girlfriend was sleeping soundly, and I'm listening to a quiet radio humming away. I start getting drowsy and take a sip. Road was just as my coffee. No cars in sight except for a spotted few on the side of the road here and there. In the distance, I can make out what looks like a hitchhiker, or what I think is one, but can't really tell due to such low light. As I get closer, I start to notice other things, like how the person is tall and thin. For the most part, apparently brown. I'm right up on this thing now, and at about 20 feet it turns around and locks eyes with me as I pass by. This was no person, and it is the most terrifying thing I've ever seen in my life. It was a deer, or I tell myself it was. I've seen deer stand on their hind legs to fight, but they still have deer posture when they do. Not only that, but I was watching this thing walk on its hind legs for about 30 seconds from first seeing it in the distance to passing it. Let me tell you, the posture was human. Standard biped stance, arms back, chin down. But the worst part was the eyes, or lack thereof. In their place were two large black was going off a ramp close to that thing. After we pulled into the station, I had a complete meltdown. I started crying harder than I ever thought I could. I couldn't breathe, talk, or do anything but want to curl up in a ball and cry. Which, by the way, is completely odd behavior for me. This has never happened. After 30 minutes or so, she finally gets me to calm down enough to tell her what happened. I don't think she believed me exactly what I think I saw. She knew that I was convinced and legitimately scared to death. Every once in a blue moon, I will dream about it and wake up, shivering, sweating, and freezing. She will tease me about it or roll over and ignore me instead of comforting me about the one thing that I've ever been terrified of. But I know what I saw, and I know it will haunt me for the rest of my life. So, everybody knows what he saw, right? An SW. Yes, I don't like to say the word. I believe they're real. You don't mess with them, for sure. You're smart. You're very smart. I really want to find this again, because this is a really good, deep dive into your creepiest real life story on Ask Reddit. I mean, I've gone probably 400 in, and all of the comments, probably 6,000, because there are 7,200 comments. Jeez, baby crazy. Moving on. I went through a phase after high school where I thought I wanted to join the military. I met with several recruiters from each branch, but none went so far as the Marine. He came through my line where I was cashiering at my crappy little high school job and left a business card. I called him a day later and he came to meet me at my house. He did the reading test and the little card game where you put what's least important to you last. Leading up to what's most important tells you how the Marines can help you achieve that. I went to his office a town away and toured his little facility, where in the back, potential candidates met every Tuesday and Thursday to train for PT tests. He came through my line every week or so to check up on me while I was at work. Eventually I moved away from the idea of military lifestyle completely after my family and boyfriend gave me grief. I saw the Marine in my line later that week and let him know my decision. Then he started to come every single day to see me. I mean, every single day. I don't know if he knew my schedule or if he just showed up hoping to see me, but every day I worked, I saw him. Everything accumulated on a late evening where I stayed very late closing. I had to see the Marine at 8:30, made small talk, sent him on, worked the rest of my shift, walked out at 10:15 p.m. through the employee entrance exit. He was waiting there, wanted to walk me to my car. He leaned against my door, blocking me from getting in. He pushed me harder and harder to try to join his branch. I don't know what he saw in me, but he promised me the world. If few employees walked out and I tried to subtly get their attention, but they ignored me. After about 30 minutes of increasingly creepy talk, I told them that I forgot my jacket in the building and I needed to go inside and get it. Smart girl. I started walking towards the entrance, intending to either call the police or our AP team to walk me to the car. As I walked, he handed me his jacket and apologized. He told me to get into my car to warm up. I got in my car and tried to hand him his jacket through my window. He told me to wear it. He'll follow me home and get it from me when I got home. I slowly drive out of the parking lot, trying to think of what to do. I was young and I didn't know if I should call the police about this guy whose jacket I'm wearing following me home. I was scared out of my mind. This was a big guy compared to me, with all sorts of formal training and probably a gun on his hip. Most likely in his car for sure. I called my boyfriend and asked him what to do as I drove down the highway with the Marine's headlights in my rearview mirror. He told me to come to his house. His dad was in the Special Forces, Maroon Berets, something like that, and would meet me at the front porch with one of his guns. Well, I turned off the highway much earlier than I think the Marine expected and floored it. I don't know if he gave up or just couldn't find me. But when I got to my boyfriend's house, his dad was out there and the Marine wasn't. I stayed the night with my boyfriend, called one of our friends who was a local officer about the situation. He advised us to call the Marine CO and explained what had happened. The next day I called out of work, called the CO, and also mentioned that I had his jacket. The CO arranged a time to meet me so I could give him his jacket, and when he was sure the Marine would not be there for me. When I arrived, he took the jacket from me and promised me that he would be sending the Marine far, far away from my little town. Probably that little piece of evidence helped seal his fate. Now this person says not horribly creepy, but I think it's super creepy because this is a person in a position of power that is obviously interested in her or has some kind of need to have her join his platoon. It's very just strange. Oh, this is gonna be good. It's in Idaho, and Idaho is creepy. I love it there, but I've had some really creepy experiences in Idaho. Your new fave. Moving on. My boyfriend and I decided to go to a secluded hot springs in Idaho. It was March, but there was still a lot of snow on the ground. The hike was 2 miles in, but the warm, humid air made the ground incredibly slick and treacherous. We were not going to let that stop us. We get to the hot springs, get naked, soak, drank wine, smoked weed, had sex, etc. We were there for several hours, not another soul in sight. We figured the ground was too treacherous for anyone to try to hike in. Suddenly we both spot a guy walking up towards the hot springs. We figured he would get in and we would leave. Instead, he climbed up to where we were sitting and started asking us questions like, "Have you seen any deer or animals?" "No," we said. And that if he wanted to get in, we would leave. He would not leave, he just kept staring at me. I, still naked, felt very uncomfortable. Then I look over at my boyfriend and realize that it's not just me, we are both uncomfortable. My boyfriend, I could tell, was getting prepared to fight this guy. My boyfriend had a knife, but it was in his backpack several feet away. His left, we quickly got dressed and hiked back out. We still had the uneasy feeling of being watched. In addition, it was not hunting season, nor did this guy have a gun or look like he was prepared for hunting. I honestly thought I was going to be R-worded and my boyfriend was going to be murdered. Or maybe both murdered. We were both thinking of ways to get out of the situation and how it could have turned out really bad. Yes. Wow. I was talking to my girlfriend a few days ago about somebody she knew who was an officer, and she felt like he was hitting on her, and he was getting more aggressive. Now he's a pretty young guy, and he had shown signs of aggression before, but her husband was there to stop it. Anyway, long story short, he started to get more aggressive, and she had to push him out the door, and she called the police. Come to find out that this guy had other complaints about his behavior being aggressively, overly sexual to women. Moving on, this will be the last one. I think we're coming up on 4 hours. Who is Jaenga? So who is Jaenga? My girlfriend and I, a few years back, took a month-long trip driving up the west coast of the US. Stopping at national parks and camping along the way. We were on our way to Death Valley a little later in the day, around 5 p.m. We knew the sun would set around 8, and we knew we could get some pretty sweet magic hour shots of the sand dunes if we made it in time. Oh, for reference, we're both photographers. I don't know how much information on Death Valley is common knowledge, but it is known to have the lowest elevation in North America and has no cell phone reception. When you're heading in, it's strongly recommended you let someone know what part of Death Valley you're going and what time you plan on heading out. If they don't hear from you by that time, they can dispatch to send someone looking for you. If you're the adventurous type, finding you can be like looking for a needle in the haystack. So we made the 2-hour drive through 120-degree weather, windows rolled down, AC off in case the car started to overheat. Out to the sand dunes, just in time to catch the sun going down. We both get amazing photos. And there's something strange about the sunsets in Death Valley. There's a faint streak of purple and red haze that glow from the sun setting behind the mountains. It's beautiful yet kind of eerie. We get back to the car in the dark and start our long journey back. Knowing if one of our tires popped could potentially lead to us being stranded definitely put me on edge. So I was very focused on my driving. About 20 minutes into the drive, I noticed headlights behind us approaching at a really fast speed. As they got closer, they started flashing their high beams at us. At first, I figured they wanted to drive around us, so I slightly pulled to the side, but they stuck right behind me, continuing to flash their lights. Now I'm thinking that it's somebody who needs help, and they're asking me to pull over. I slow to a stop, but sure as hell don't get out of the car. They stop behind me. I watch in my rear view mirror as close as possible to get any hint of what in the world is going on. I can now see it's a minivan and there's some shuffling going on, but it's too dark to see who's inside. I sat there for a good minute trying to decide what to do. The side door of the van swings open and a light in the van turns on to reveal 5 to 6 teenagers grabbing things from different parts of the van. They were each stepping out of the van into the dark, one by one, walking towards